Joining me today is Sara Neff, Senior Vice President of Sustainability with Kilroy Realty Corporation. Sara, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Kilroy received the 2016 Leader in the Light Award in the office sector, reflecting the company's superior portfolio-wide sustainability efforts. Now, if you had to nail it down to one project or initiative that sort of best sums up what makes Kilroy a leader in this area, what would that be?
So one of my favorite projects that it's sort of hard to figure out how it gets reflected in the GRES survey that feeds into the Leader in the Light Award is our Green Janitor education program. So 40% of my buildings, which is to say 98% of my eligible buildings, the janitors in those buildings have gone through 30 hours of education that covers topics from energy, like vampire power, water around leaks, recycling practices. It has a midterm and a final. There's a graduation ceremony that I attend, any one that I can drive to, so I think I'm at like an 85% rate on attendance. And then they get a certification at the end. There's a little financial bonus. And what we found in that is that when those janitors are engaged, because janitors are the eyes and ears of a building, right? They're the people who know who's not recycling, who's leaving their computer monitors on, where things might be leaking, but they might not feel empowered to share that information with the night foreman, with whoever else. But when we give the janitors that training, then all of a sudden we see energy go down and we see water go down in those buildings. And so what I love about that program is that it's kind of this sort of out of the box kind of pilot that I think exemplifies our sustainability programs.
Now, when a company first begins to focus on sustainability, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that they can take on and achieve dramatic gains and returns. As a leader in sustainability, you've already addressed a lot of that low-hanging fruit. So how do you handle that challenge of coming up with sort of the next project, next initiative, and still deliver strong returns?
I have to say, I'm an optimist, right? So there is a level at which at the beginning of every year when we think, oh goodness, how are we going to do this again? But I believe in human ingenuity. I believe in markets getting efficient. And so I think a great example is lighting. Well, LEDs used to be really expensive. So we did a bunch of lighting retrofits in 2012, and I thought, boy, I guess we're done. I don't think we'll ever do another lighting retrofit. We've done our whole portfolio. It's not going to make sense. And then LEDs got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And then all of a sudden, LEDs could meet our payback hurdle. And so now we're in the process of retrofitting everything with LEDs. And I see the same thing with just new technologies, pilots of technologies I'd never heard of 2 years ago that we're deploying now, ceramic roof coatings and, foam that cleans the fan coils and, cool window film and all these things that weren't there. So I kind of have to believe that there will just always be things that haven't been tapped yet because I believe in human ingenuity and drive to make this market work because it's such a large market and there's so many people who are trying to innovate in this space.
And we've talked in the past about the need for the industry to develop a universal reporting standard for sustainability. What progress has been made in that regard? And do you think there is a clearer understanding now by all parties, REITs, investors, tenants, about what is needed to accomplish this?
We're still not there in terms of standardized reporting. However, I do see some bright spots in the sense that more in 2016 than I'd ever seen before, I'm seeing investors start to ask these questions. Multiple investors are asking questions about sustainability. And I think investors are getting frustrated, but I think that frustration is good about the fact that there's just too many reporting frameworks and too much to sort of sift through. So I'm hoping, and it seems like we're getting the right players at the right tables, that those conversations are starting to happen such that a more standardized framework will bubble up. I'm much more hopeful about that than I was last year. So we're not there yet, but we seem to be making progress.
And lastly, what do you envision as sort of the next frontier in sustainability that you and your peers are going to be facing?
Right. So our current sort of trend we're all dealing with right now is health. I was really happy that GRES also named us #1 on health in 2016. So we're all dealing with that now in terms of our air quality testing and filtration media and well certifications and all that. I see the next trend is resilience, really figuring out what it means to be a more resilient building than the building down the street. And is that because you have some backup generation? Is that because you know your neighbor and so you can go talk to them if there's an emergency? What does that mean? I think that we're all recognizing sort of the need for that in a post-Sandy kind of world. And we have guidance now published, so we have a primer basically on what that looks like. But there's no rating system yet, so I think that's where we're going. And I see after that, we're going to be dealing with really starting to try to understand our supply chains in maybe the way that the electronics industry or the clothing industries or the food industries currently do. You know, really understanding our building materials, where are they coming from, who's working on them, you know, all down the chain where fair labor practice is used. That's really not something that people in the real estate industry have a ton of insight into right now, but I see maybe 5-7 years down the line, we're gonna figure out how to ask those questions and who to ask those questions of. So that's where I see us going.
Sara, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
For more from NAREIT's 2017 Leader in the Light Working Forum, be sure to visit REIT.com.